So do y'all remember back when Tim Walz was on the ticket with Kamala and MAGA came out and said, hey, look, here's a bunch of Tim Walz's cousins don't even like him. Well, that story turned out to be a whole lot of BS, but this story here is one that kind of made me stop and pause, and I said to myself, we need to zero in on this one because this is one of JD Vance's cousins who is speaking out, and he's speaking out about the war in Ukraine because he actually served in Ukraine. And he really feels as though his cousin JD is misguided. I don't know if that's how I would put it, but that's how that he feels. There was a piece done on CNN. I'm going to play you a couple of clips from it. Some of the clips are a little bit long, but I think this is really good, and we really need to see it because Nate Vance says that he is a right-leaning independent. There's been times when he agreed with the Trump administration, but he can't agree with them on their stance about Ukraine, and he sees clearly why Russia is the enemy. So take a look at this, and then we'll talk more about it.
Tonight, an Outfront exclusive. JD Vance's cousin, my guest, and a former U.S. Marine standing up to the vice president over his stance on Ukraine. Nate Vance is a Texas native. He fought on the front lines in Ukraine for nearly 3 years as part of the elite Da Vinci Wolves Battalion, seeing some of the war's bloodiest, most horrific battles all the way from 2022 until just this January. This video shows him in a trench as Russian artillery rounds were raining down on him and his battalion. These images show the two cousins back in the day vacationing together. Through the years, Nate and JD share grandparents. JD's mother and Nate's father are siblings. And Nate Vance is out front now. Nate, I really appreciate your talking, and I want to get to exactly why you're speaking out, because I know you do so after careful consideration. So, Nate, I know you call yourself a Republican-leaning independent. I know you've been supportive at times of the Trump administration. But on this issue of Ukraine, where you have put so much of your life over these past few years, you think your cousin is misguided. How come?
Excuse me. Well, I think my experience in Ukraine has given me a unique perspective that most Americans don't have. There are certainly cultural differences both between the Ukrainians and Americans and the Russians. And I think if you try to deal with Russia through an American lens, it will come back to bite you. They don't necessarily think like we think. And I'm talking about their political class. I've personally witnessed them shooting their own troops on enough occasions that it wasn't just an isolated incident. It's happened quite a bit, enough to the point where you could consider it to be policy if troops are retreating. So these people, as a policy, will eat their own. So they will not hesitate to eat an American president or American vice president. They don't care what we think. They're not our allies, and they never will be.
You know, I got to be honest with y'all. I do have cousins who I strongly disagree with to the point that we don't even talk politics. But if one of my cousins were to come back from Ukraine and tell me that, I do believe that that would stop me in my tracks and at least make me rethink things for a second. But this interview that he did on CNN is really good, and I want us to get back to that because, again, I think this is a story worth diving into. So let's get back to his interview.
I know that you've tried to reach out to your cousin since he took office, but haven't been successful. I mean, what were you planning to say to him? I mean, what do you want to say to him now in this moment?
Well, look, I mean, there's more than one reason why you could make the argument for supporting Ukraine. There's the, kind of emotional argument, the human element argument part of it, which, fine, if that's the argument you want to make in order to support Ukraine, then I support that. There's also the element of how it will affect the United States long term, right? So if you're just more transactional in nature and you are concerned, what is the benefit for the United States? I don't think there's any scenario where if this war pauses and sanctions are lifted, Russia has spent the last 3 years kind of beefing up their military-industrial complex, and if you lift those sanctions, you're going to see a massive influx of funds into that military-industrial complex, and they're going to build a war machine out of it, right? That's what they're going to do. And the concept of an imperialistic, aggressive, modernized military Russia who has learned their lessons about modern combat is problematic for our future. And if the Russians are given significant concessions in this ceasefire, they will spin that as a victory of sorts. But their view is they're not done. So to them, it's just a chance to regroup, build up and modernize, and they'll come back. And when they do come back, they'll be more of a problem than they are now.
You know, I can't say that I'm surprised that he's not been able to get JD on the phone, but he's absolutely right when he says that Russia will view this type of thing as a victory. And I can tell you, they definitely viewed it as a victory when JD Vance stepped in and went at Zelensky the way that he did. I think that's the bigger picture that a lot of people aren't looking at. Anytime I cover this stuff and I'm talking about, the Nazis and the white supremacists and all these things and all these imagery that Donald Trump thinks is okay to put out there into the world, some people will say, oh, well, they're just trolling, you're being hyperbolic. No. When you put this stuff out into the world, those people see that, they see it for the dog whistle that it is, and they cheer for it, and they consider it to be a victory. And it's the same thing going on with Russia. I want to play you one more clip from this interview, and then we'll wrap this video up.
I think I'm thinking of the moment when your cousin, Vice President Vance, publicly reprimanded Ukraine's president, right? It's an unforgettable moment in the Oval Office when your cousin's sitting on the couch and Zelensky is next to Trump sitting in those chairs. Let me just play it.
Mm-hmm. I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media. You should be thanking the president for trying to bring an end to this conflict.
JD Vance was seen as widely seen as the instigator, in that moment, right? When he got it, you should show appreciation, and he was angry.
Yeah.
You obviously have known him his whole life. Did it surprise you, the way he acted in that moment?
I was surprised. I think what surprised me the most was, regardless of the situation, there's a certain level of decorum that should be reached. And, I'm not naive enough to think that, national leaders don't debate behind closed doors. But when you do that and you publicly, kind of ridicule someone in public, that they have to almost defend themselves. So it was really disappointing to see it for me. I disagreed with that tact.
Now,
there's a much more diplomatic way to say, wait, I think we're getting off on the wrong foot here. Maybe we can kind of, readdress what our positions are and things like that. There's much better ways to handle that.
So I guess the moral of the story is JD Vance at least has one decent person in his family. We could say that. He seemed to be very reasonable. He wasn't there, name calling or, there's going to be a whole lot of people, I'm sure, that's going to say, well, he's just trying to cash in on his 15 minutes of fame or something like that. But that's not the kind of vibes that he gave to me at all. He seemed like someone that genuinely was concerned, and I can't imagine what it would be like. I mean, like I said earlier, I've had some pretty hardcore disagreements with some cousins, but I can't imagine seeing my cousin sitting next to the President of the United States and talking to one of our allies the way that he did President Zelensky. I mean, I get irritated enough at some of my cousin's Facebook posts. So I can't imagine what it would be like to see someone sell out the way that JD has. But I really don't think that JD is misguided. I think JD is doing exactly what he set out to do. And I think the people that got him there and put him there is very happy with his performance. And, he has completely flipped the script from where he stood all those years ago, or at least he has enough to where he was able to get in the spot that he got in. I want to play this real quick here, and I just thought of this out of the last second. But I just want to play this one hot mic moment from Trump's speech, because this kind of says a lot about JD Vance. And you can't necessarily hear what he had to say, but just read the body language of him and Mike Johnson, and then tell me what you think about it. Take a look.
This is, I gotta be honest with you, this is by the way, I think the speech is gonna be great, but I don't know how you do this for 90 minutes.
The hardest thing was doing it during Biden, when the speech was a stupid campaign speech.
So whatever it was he had to say, he made sure that he leaned in and got closer to Mike Johnson to say it. And then, I don't see how you can do this for 90 minutes. I don't think that JD is stupid. I'll say that. I know a lot of people's probably disagreeing with him right now. I don't think he's stupid. I think he's a smart guy. I think he sees through Donald Trump. I think he just used it to get where he needed to get in this world. And I think that's why that when he had his chance to take his swing at Zelensky, he did it. And I think in time, as we go forward, and I'm not trying to bring down the room, but something in my gut just tells me that in years to come, we're probably going to be talking about JD Vance, as like, man, God, I thought Trump was bad, but this is even worse because I don't know. I don't have a good feeling about JD Vance in my gut because I feel like he said whatever was popular at that particular moment to get over. And I think he will continue to do so. And those are the type of people that should ever be in a position of leadership, and they should never have our rights, and they should never have our lives. They shouldn't be making decisions anywhere near any of that. But unfortunately, he's a young guy. He's the VP, and he could be around for a long time. So it may be a bumpy road with him, but at least he had one cousin that tried to talk some sense to him anyway.